So what kind of MedTech companies are pushing fast for sustainability? Here are 5 disciplines who push to develop sustainable medical devices. Starting off, we have ophthalmology. Ophthalmology has one of the most performed surgeries worldwide, which is the cataract surgery. So gray star surgery, when people get older, the eyes get murky, and then what they will do is they will cut open the eye and they will replace the lens, the natural lens, with a lens implant via a intraocular lens implant, and then they have a lot of single-use medical devices that go along with this surgery. It has a lot of, let's say, visible waste, and there are NGOs in this space. So one I mentioned here is iSustain. They are pushing for more sustainability because they have so much single-use waste and because it's one of the most prevalent surgeries worldwide. I know a lot of companies in that space who are active towards being more sustainable with their medical devices, but I brought you one example from MediCel. It's called Terralution. It's an intraocular lens injector, which is designed by eco-design principles, so weight reduction and all that good stuff. And then they also used biomaterials as much as possible, reducing their CO2 footprint significantly. Then moving on, we have lab consumables. Lab consumables have an extreme volume of single-use devices, single-use consumables, may that be to hold samples or pipette tips or stuff like that. And lab professionals equate sustainability with waste production. And therefore, they also are pushing these companies towards more sustainability. What I heard multiple times was the term wall of shame. So they put up all the plastics, the single-use plastics on one wall, and then they usually take a photo of it, which is the wall of shame with all the lab consumable waste. And what I've been seeing in the space is like companies like Hamilton or Eppendorf or also other players who are switching to bio-based consumables, which are gaining traction. Usually they're done by an ISCC plus drop-in solution. So they're using the same kind of plastics with bio-based feedstock. And what we also see in this space is that the ACT label from My Green Lab is pushing a little towards that. So this is very, very an active space. And this is also why I put them on here. I see a lot going on in the lab consumable space. Then, third up, we have endoscopes. And I think this comes down to the recent shift that we have seen from multi-use endoscopes to single-use endoscopes, which has been accelerated by COVID. So what has been happening since 2020 is that the industry shifted, or the hospitals shifted from multi-use endoscopes towards more single-use endoscopes, which create visible waste in the operating room. So the surgeons and the nurses are more aware of the waste that they're generating. And sustainability has now become a differentiating part of the marketing strategy of such a single-use endoscope. And what we have here in this space, and I think this is also why endoscopes are actually on here, is the company Ambu, which I recently and multiple times have referred to as the poster child of sustainability in medical technology. So they implemented a bunch of measures like eco-design and bio-based plastics in their handles, and they have a take-back and recycling system. And they really embedded sustainability in their strategy, and they see it as their strategic advantage. Because usually what you get with surgeons or with hospitals is, number one, they ask about the performance because the clinical outcome is the number one. Then secondly, they ask about how much does it cost? And the third thing is, what do you do about sustainability? So those are the 3 main deciding factors that you will be asked from hospitals. And I think Ambu is really leading that space, and a lot of competitors of them also want to basically compete with them on this term on sustainability. So this is why I see endoscopy as one of the top 3 spaces in terms of sustainable medical devices in the next few years. Then we have surgical devices in general. We have in the past also had a strong shift from multi-use towards single-use for safety and convenience, as it was with the endoscopes. But the waste volume and also like the waste complexity, like a bunch of these surgical devices now have are basically power tools. They have electronics and they have intelligence, computational power in them. And now they're single use, so they're disposed of. And this is complex medical waste. It's not only contaminated, but it also is e-waste and difficult to recycle due to that. And that really increases the cost and visibility of this waste in the hospitals. Then there are two dominant approaches. Like big players like Johnson & Johnson implemented the take-back and recycling system for their staplers. Of course, this is something that you can do. And the second approach is from Medtronic. I've seen this also like pop up multiple times during our podcast discussions, is the concept of hybrid use devices. And the first time I've seen it implemented is with this Signia stapling system from Medtronic, which what they basically do is they have the stapler, basically the instrument in the front is detachable and the electronics in the back is reusable, which saves a lot of e-waste and a lot of complex waste. And the part that is actually contaminated heavily and difficult to clean, this is single use and can be thrown away. So that reduces, I think, the waste by 2/3-ish. And this is definitely a space to look out for. It's complex devices. It's not easy to implement all this into your design. However, I think there's a lot of market share and customer trust to be earned if you're designing your surgical devices for more sustainability. And then lastly, I would have autoinjectors. I think the number of autoinjectors produced every year goes into the billions, and also very much pushed by the advances in pharmaceuticals. So like GLP-1, of course, pushed autoinjectors to another level. And most pharma companies are very big corporations, and those usually tend to have strong sustainability commitments since they have a lot of public and also investor pressure to do so. But what I've found, and this may be subjective, is that large pharma companies tend to be slower in sustainability adoption. So it's like the auto-injectors, they're there. So we see stuff like EcoInject or the Ipsomed, Ipsoloop. I've also seen other concepts of sustainable auto-injectors, and I know that a lot of these companies are working on it because also customer demands it, but the price discussion is always very difficult because these, let's say, who's paying for the actual pharmaceutical that comes with the auto-injector, of course, that differs between countries. And it also differs between drugs. So is it like the end customer, the patient who's paying for it? Is it insurance? It's always very difficult to negotiate with the insurance. So I've heard things like a few cents or even a fraction of a cent per auto-injector is not acceptable as a green premium. So that makes it difficult. And then in big organizations to make a change is actually pretty difficult. So it's more difficult to replace 1 billion auto-injectors than it is to replace, let's say, 50,000 endoscopes a year. That should make sense because also like the processes and everything involved in making such auto-injectors is very intricate and is very efficient with big molds, with difficult processes. So it's not as easy to change something over. Good. In conclusion, what similarities do we find? Hospitals tend to not care about CO2. As corporations, as companies, we usually report on CO2. However, hospitals think about waste. Waste is sustainability for them. And wherever there's visible single-use waste, there is customer pressure to be more sustainable. And of course, they will understand that changing the plastics will be better for the environment. However, they associate waste and waste reduction with sustainability. So wherever there's visible waste, there's pressure. And wherever the pressure exists, the sustainable devices will emerge. In the end, I will have one honorable mention. I purposefully not included packaging. Packaging is, of course, a space where we have multiple companies active in pushing for more sustainable medical packaging, such as Evertis, Medipac, Coveris, or Pacmedica, but there's many, many others. So this is why I put a lot of question marks on there, not because I don't know them, but want to make a separate video on sustainable packaging in medical technology. So therefore, yeah, packaging is a very active space, also influenced due to the PPWR. medical packaging is out of scope for recyclability and out of scope for recycling content. But people think about this because these exemptions can go away in the future. So there are a lot of companies pushing for market share via more sustainability over the packaging route. And stay tuned for that video because I will certainly be doing that. Good. So in summary, we have the 5 MedTech disciplines who are really pushing for sustainability, and that is ophthalmology, lab consumables, endoscopy, surgical devices, and lastly, autoinjectors. All they have in common that there's a lot of single-use waste associated with it, and healthcare professionals associate waste and waste reduction with sustainability. So there is where your pressure is currently coming from. And the second, I would say, pressure is a little off at the moment, and that is, I would say, like the regulatory pressure. It's gonna come back with the engines, in my opinion. But yeah, this is how I see the industry moving forward. If I forgot something, write it down in the comments. I would love to see if there's other spaces I haven't looked at that are active in this space. So if you want to make your medical device more sustainable with plastic, there's a link in the description for you. I'd love to chat with you. And if you like, comment, and subscribe, YouTube will show you more of these videos because it will learn what you like and then show you more of that. So do that, not for me, but for you. And then if you want to request another video besides the packaging video that I'm going to do anyways, just let me know in the comments. And if you have a question, also write them in the comments. I read all of those and I answer all of the questions. Good. So thank you very much for watching. My name is Lucas Penegonda and have a good one.